how we act, how we look, what posture we're supposed to have is important. Now, we get all these questions that come up throughout the Christian life, and we think through, just think through your week and all the crazy things that might have happened or the things that you might have read about, and just think, what am I supposed to do with that? I just keep thinking over and over again the stuff with ISIS overseas and how they're killing Christians. I'm like, man, what am I supposed to do with that? How am I supposed to stand for that? Or how am I supposed to stand against that? What posture as a Christian am I supposed to take for that? Or it could just be the simple stuff of life, like the guy cut you off on the way to work this week. Remember that? What posture are you supposed to take when that happens? Right? And that's how I am typically, but no, we have to figure out what it is. How is it that we're supposed to stand? Or how is it we're supposed to sit? How is it we're supposed to walk? Do we stand up for certain things, or do we just bow down and pray about everything? That's kind of the question. And sometimes we come up with this dichotomy, and we say, hey, it has to be either or. Either we stand up against evil, or we just pray against all the evil, and we'll be good. But what's the answer? What's it supposed to look like? How are we supposed to respond to all those myriad number of circumstances that we face each and every day? Glad you asked. Yeah, that's good. You didn't know you were asking that, right? Well, in Daniel chapter 6, that's where we're going to be today. Daniel, a very famous story. You may have heard it. Daniel and the lion's den. Yeah, some of you say yes. Some of you like, no, that's okay. If you know, we'll read the story so you know what's going on here. But Daniel and the lion's a very famous story, one of the most familiar events in the Old Testament. And it occurs right at the start of a new government. The new king had taken control. He'd been there maybe 2 or 3 years at the most. King Darius was now in charge. And Daniel had lived in Persia for about 70, 80 years at this point. This guy, he's getting on in age. And throughout his entire career, Daniel had been a guide to all of the kings. And so, amazingly enough, I think it's because of the grace of God and because he continued to pursue God, God had continued to use him even through transitions from kings. Typically, when a king was deposed, all of his advisors were killed. You were a bad advisor. Your king lost to us, so you're dead, and we cut you off, right? But Daniel is one of those, that didn't happen to him. He actually served through at least 3 different kings that we know of throughout the kingdom of Persia there. And he sticks down there. But he's just got this new kings in town. The new governor, the new leadership is being formed here. And Daniel's in charge once again. And we kind of pick up right there. Daniel chapter 6, verse 1. And it should be up here for you. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom. You know what a satrap is? Oh, come on. Never heard that word before? Me neither. I had to look it up. I had no idea. I had no idea. A satrap was a protector of the kingdom. They basically were lower officials, kind of like a mayor, okay? There would be governors over these guys, someone kind of like a governor that would be in charge of these guys. So they'd be the little towns and little areas throughout the kingdom would be run by a satrap, okay? So that's what those are. Now you know. You can go tell your waiter at your restaurant, you sound really smart. Over the satraps were 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account so that the king might suffer no loss. Apparently satraps stole money all the time, so they have to have somebody to look over their affairs, okay? And Daniel was one of the guys that looked over them. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other presidents and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. And Daniel, again, just doing his job, doing what he was supposed to do. He had been faithful throughout many kings. In fact, he had served Nebuchadnezzar, one of the best-known kings of the ancient kingdom. And he was still around, and Darius is like, dude, you're a smart guy. You get it. You're faithful. You do everything right. We're going to put you in charge of everybody. And you know how that goes. New kings, new people. You ever been promoted too fast in your job? You get people like, oh, right? That's what's going on here. You start hearing some grumbling here. Verse 4, then the presidents and the satraps sought to find a ground of complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they could find no ground for complaint or any fault because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, we shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. Then these presidents and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, O King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and injunction. All right, so you get the picture. Daniel's new kid on the block. Everybody thinks he's kind of, the king thinks he's really great, and all of his new co-workers hate him because he's getting all the privilege and he's getting promoted faster than them. I've served King Darius for years now, and how come I'm not the one in charge of all of this, Daniel gets the job. This isn't fair. So the 3 or 4 guys that get really ticked off, they totally start playing Spy Kids, right? They get their little spy gear out. Let's see what we can find. We're going to sneak around and find things that Daniel did wrong, all right? And they investigate Daniel. What do they find? Right, that's the right answer. Since nobody said anything, that's exactly right. Nothing. He didn't say anything. They found nothing. There was nothing wrong with the way Daniel had done his job. And they couldn't figure it out. So they said, man, this isn't fair. We don't like this. He's trustworthy. He's honest. There's absolutely no corruption. There's only going to be one way that we can get rid of Daniel. The one thing we know for certain that can get Daniel in trouble. What was it? Right. He always prayed to his God. Hey, he's got this habit. He goes up on his house, and we'll talk about it in a second. He goes up on the top of his house, and he prays all of the time. And we know that. And we know that he is completely committed to his God. Maybe we could figure out a way to get him to be pushed out of the picture. But if we found something to do with his religion, what can we do? So again, you got the little 3 or 4 group of people come, and they say, everyone says, O King Darius. Now, who said? 3 guys. But they said, everyone. You ever hear that? Everybody's saying, right? They all say. I love that. I use that on my kids. Well, they say, and my kids are like, who's they? I'm like, shh, don't tell me that, right? They say that you, king, should make this decree, and you should be the one that everyone prays only through you for the next 30 days. You should serve as the chief priest of all of the religions for 30 days. And all the priests have to come to you, all the people have to come to you, everybody has to go through you to get to their gods for 30 days. This is total standard operating procedure for new kings and new kingdoms, okay? Not unusual. In fact, the king doesn't want that job permanently. That's why it's only for 30 days. I mean, who would want that? I would not want all of you to bring me your prayer requests so that I could give them to God for you. That would just be, I would be busy for 30, I mean, that's just crazy. But that's what's going on. That's what he's saying is going to happen. And if you don't use the king as your high priest for the next 30 days, then you will get killed. All right, how's that? Think of that for 30 days. You can't pray unless you come find me. And what if I'm not in the office? You're out of luck, right? That's what's going on. You have to find him and get there and use him. So they said, hey, king, here, we want you to do this. They really push. This is important. Everyone says we should do this. And they said, sign this law, sign it now, do it now, hurry, sign it. And the king never takes a moment, never steps back, never asks, who are the others that say to do this? What does he do? He signs it. Have you been pressured into that? This is like used car salesman right here, okay? And if you're a used car salesman, I'm sorry. I apologize. Please forgive me. But you just get that pressure. You have to sign. Do it right now. When we bought our van, man, this guy was like, all right, here it is. Here's the deal. If you will sign this paper, I will give you the car for this amount. I'm like, dude, I called you on the phone, and you said $5,000 less than that. No, I'm going to leave. Oh, wait, hold on. You know, pressure. Just try to sign it, right? So the king signs it. Here's something that just a small takeaway. If you're a believer and you trust in God, let me just remind you, you always have time to pray. Always. You always have this moment. There's always a chance. You can always just take a step, take a breath, and pray, hey, God, help me in this situation. Sometimes our circumstances just come pressing and pouring down on us, and we forget that we can take a moment. We just think, our society is instant society. I got the text message. I have to answer right now, right? The Facebook message comes in. I have to respond. I have to like this post now or it's gone forever, right? And we just get this now instant society. But we don't have to operate that way. Did you know when your phone rings, you don't have to answer it? It's the same kind of thing. You can take a moment. It's really funny, in my house growing up, if the phone rang, my mom always would run to answer the phone. And my dad, he worked in a church, and he's like, don't answer that. It's going to be bad news. You don't want to answer that. But every time the phone rang, there goes my mom. Shh, I got it. You know, and we were trained, I'll get it. We would used to race to the phone. And my dad's like, if the phone rings, you don't have to answer it. You know, you don't have to do that. We can always take a moment. Everyone else's crisis is not your crisis. Take a moment. You have time to pray. You have time to do this. So Darius didn't do that, so don't do what Darius did. Do what Daniel did. Look, verse 10. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, what does he do? He went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. So Daniel comes in and he completely changes all of his behavior, right? No. Let's see if you're still paying attention. No, he doesn't. He does exactly what he had already done over and over and over again. He continued to develop his habits, continued to pray to God. I mean, for 70 plus years, this guy had been living in Persia, about 100 and something miles away from his homeland, where he'd been snatched when he was about 15 years old, never been back, and he's still praying to the God that he had been raised to worship. And he's still doing that. And even when he hears about this law getting passed, what does he do? He prays. He takes the time. He backs up, moves away from the pressures and situation, and still is developing his habits to pray. He's faithfully doing what he had done for the last 80 plus years of his life. He'd worshiping God boldly, publicly, and faithfully. He's choosing to obey God rather than the laws of the men that had been created around him. There's going to be times in our life when the laws of the land are going to come in conflict with what we believe and how we believe we should practice our faith. It's going to happen. Even today, we're faced with many tough ethical choices. How do we respond to these many different circumstances that we find ourselves in? And even today, we're going to have to take that time and think through, are we going to be obedient to what Scripture and what God has counseled us to do? Or are we going to give in? Are we just going to accept the things around us? This is a point for you, right? What's your posture supposed to be in that situation? Do we stand up, or do we just bow down? Or do we do both? I told you the end of the sermon. There you go. All right? As the world is going to become more and more sinful, believers are going to increasingly have to find themselves taking stands that are unpopular. And we're going to have to take positions that sometimes in some places are going to violate the law. It's going to be difficult. So the question for us in each of those situations continues to be, are we going to stand up for what is right? Are we going to bow down and continue to seek God in all things? Hopefully the answer is yes. In Acts 5:29, the early Christians, some of them have been arrested, the disciples have been arrested and told, hey, you need to stop talking about this Jesus guy, because Jesus keeps causing problems even though he's dead and gone, and we don't believe that. He's gone. And the disciples said, look, Jesus told us to preach about him no matter what happened. So you're out of luck. And the religious leaders are like, no, we told you, stop preaching about Jesus. And they said, we have to obey God rather than men. And when we really start thinking about this, guys, whose side would you rather be on anyway? In the end, when Jesus comes back as king on his cool white horse with his cool flaming sword and really cool tattoos on his thighs, and he says, it's over, it's finished, I'm the winner, whose side do you want to be on? The king's side? Or you could just, join the crowd. That'd be fun, right? Everybody's doing it. Come on, king, sign this. No, we want to worship Jesus. We want to worship the one who triumphs. And that's what Daniel is doing. He's developing this over and over again. He's continuing to worship God. So verse 11, then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition. The spy gear, have you seen that for kids, the spy gear stuff? Like the sunglasses that have the mirrors on them and you can actually look behind you. It's kind of cool. My kids have some of those. They also have like night vision goggles for kids too. I totally see these guys, this little group of guys doing that kind of stuff. Can't you just see them in their robes like crawling up to the house and, let's see, there he is. Oh, look. Someone take a picture. And, trying to draw on their little chart real fast, that's the image I get of this. I mean, just very juvenile kind of behavior here. This is just crazy to me that they would think that this would work. So they come by agreement and they found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, "O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions?" The king answered and said, "The thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked." Then they answered and said before the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but he makes his petition 3 times a day." The king's like, You just see that, oh man, I've been had, right? I didn't take my time, and now I've been had. Now he discovers it. The guy he wanted to promote to be in charge of everything is now guilty of breaking a law that I didn't really need in the first place, right? Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel, and he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, "Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed." The king says, "Man, this is not good. I messed up. Help me figure out if there's a way out of it." And he says he spends the rest of the day trying to find a way to get out of this rule. How can I find a way out? And he can't. It doesn't work. The way it's set up at the time, if you sign the law this direction, he can't do it. But Daniel's praying, and he has to figure out a way to punish him, and just, I don't know what to do here, and I want to help him out, and I'm stuck. Now, what do you think about Daniel at this point? He knows all this stuff's going on. I mean, he's one of the 3 head honchos here, right? Heck, he might have even been in the room when these guys come back to him. And the king probably went to Daniel and said, "Hey, help me find a way to save your life." And Daniel's like, "Okay, I can do that. Whatever you say, king. You can do this." And he knows what's happening. But what do we know about Daniel? Every day, 3 times a day, he's very consistent. He knows that prayer works, that prayer changes things. He's developed so many good habits and a healthy relationship with God over the course of his life that he's not worried about this anymore. These things that are going on around him, the intrigue of the court, he's faced it. I mean, he survived Nebuchadnezzar's court. You think these guys scare Daniel? He knows who is in charge. He knows who God is. He knows God can care for him and takes care of him. And prayer works. Now, for us, sometimes prayer works and not like we expect it. And I think that's what's happening here. And we keep talking about, what is prayer? Yeah, you can say it. Talking to God, right, talking to God. It's not that hard. It's talking to God, right? And we kind of make it a big deal, and we have to say, "Dear Jesus," and in your name we pray, amen, right? That's how you end a prayer. That's it. We've done it all. But prayer really is just a conversation with God. It's talking to him, having an ongoing conversation. How are you doing? Things are going well. Here's the things that I'm thinking about, praying about. God, help move me, change me, rescue me. All of those kinds of things are prayer. And if you've never prayed before, you should try it. It's pretty amazing. It's amazing what prayer does for the life of a person. It changes people. It helps them. It helps them to grow, helps them be what they're supposed to be. Now, if you've never prayed before, I would challenge that. I would say you probably have. Do you remember when that guy hurt you and cut you off on your way to work, right? That was a prayer. That, and those words that you said, that's a prayer, right? You're using God's name in vain, but it is a prayer, right? When you faced a serious illness, have you ever you see that in yourself or in the life of someone around you, and you just beg God, please have mercy. God, rescue this person. Have you prayed that way before? I mean, some of you have, yeah? We've seen God do those kinds of things. Prayer is all of those things, but prayer is also this ongoing, relational, passionate connection with God. And unfortunately, for so many, prayer just becomes routine, and then it becomes normal, and then normal becomes boring. And so we stop. Because I don't know what I'm doing, and this doesn't seem to work. People aren't around me. I don't know what to do with all this kind of stuff. Man, prayer takes habits. It takes consistency. It takes effort. But prayer works. And prayer habits lead to healthy prayer. Did you know that? How about that? What are prayer habits? What did Daniel do? 3 times a day. Now, I'm not saying that you have to set aside 3 times a day, but you need to figure out ways to consistently communicate with God. Hey, God, here I am every single time. You know, it's very important. We have something called quiet time in the church culture, and we say, hey, you should set up a time, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes every morning, just making sure that you're praying and you're reading a little bit out of your Bible. I encourage that. It's good for you. It'll help you out, help you to connect, help you to know what it is that God says. You know all the stories of God, how God has worked and how God has spoken in the past, and it helps us to be more mature believers, helps us to grow, to be consistent, to be focused. It helps us to continue to develop that relationship that we have with God. Now, what happens to Daniel? Does his prayer work? Nobody's really sure. He gets arrested. So did the prayer work? Sort of, maybe. No, yes. All right, yeah, that's good. You're fine. You can be kind of confused. Me too. I don't know. I don't know exactly what he prayed, but I'm sure he said, God, you're in control, and God, we know that you have everything in your power, and these guys are nothing compared to you, and he gets arrested anyway. And most of the time, that situation would have sealed his doom. And we can get discouraged sometimes when our prayers don't seem to be answered, or when they get answered in ways that don't seem like how we were praying for them. But Daniel here, he's been faithful to God for 70 plus years, and he's still facing trials. We shouldn't be surprised when we still face trials. Circumstances are still going to be tough at times. That doesn't mean stop praying, and that doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that Jesus doesn't love you. It just means that you're normal. Did you know that? It's okay. It's going to be hard sometimes. I guarantee it. This never wins anyone over. People are always like, I did not want to hear that today, right? Well, happy Sunday. Life is hard, and it just gets harder. But Jesus is still there for us. We can still pray to him. The thing about this, though, at this point in the story, this is not the end of the story. And I would challenge you, in the midst of the difficult circumstances, to think through this. Is what's happening in my life right now the end of the story? Well, if Jesus is coming on the white horse and coming to rescue us, that's the end of the story. If that's happening in your life right now, no, sorry, you're out of luck. You're not at the end of the story. What does that mean for us? This is our great hope. The story's not over. So those difficult things, when things don't go our way, that's not the end. We're still moving towards the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end, right? Everything will be okay in the end. Ever heard this before? My dad says this all the time. In fact, he has it taped on his desk. He says, everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. How about that? I'm like, man, Dad, you're so wise. He's like, yes, I wrote that. I'm like, yeah, right, Dad. I don't believe you. But so don't give up. If your prayers are seemingly unanswered, maybe the end of the story has yet to come. Don't give up on those family members you've been praying for. Don't give up on those friends that you've been hanging out with that you care about so much. Don't give up on those loved ones that you've just poured your heart out for. If it's not okay, it's not the end. So here's Daniel. Is he standing up? Is he bowing down? Yes. Right? So here's what happens. Verse 16, then the king commanded, can't find a way to rescue him. The king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. Yay. All right? Happy joy. This is an awful way to die. I'll just let you know, as far as my experience is with that. I've never been thrown in a den of lions. I'm just kidding. But see if he was still there. So the king declared to Daniel, may your God whom you serve continually deliver you. And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. All right, the king was really worried about this. I've sentenced an innocent man to die. The only thing I can do is to carry out the punishment. The punishment is that you have to go into the den of lions. All right, so Daniel, I have to do this. May God rescue you in however way that works out for you. Good luck here. We hope that works for you. It's sealed. Don't mess with this rock. No one is allowed to help him or rescue him in any kind of way. You're placed in this and you're sent to your doom. Sound familiar? Has that ever happened anywhere else in the Bible? Someone of significance who is completely obedient to God and doing everything he's supposed to do is placed in a dark hole because he died. Oh, thank you. Somebody finally helped me. Jesus, yes, Jesus did this. Jesus is the one that has done this. When he died, he was placed in a tomb. They sealed the tomb. They put the Roman special forces on it so that no one would mess with it, right? To protect it, to make sure that nothing happened here. That's the reason that we're here to worship each week is because that tomb was not the end. It wasn't the end of the story. What's the end of the story? Jesus on the horse, right? You're going to remember Jesus on a horse at the end. I know that's the only thing you're going to remember, but that's okay. That's the end. Jesus comes out of the tomb. He defeats death. Jesus had come. He lives his perfect life. He teaches us how to live and how to trust him above all things. The religious leaders hate him, and so they get jealous of him because he has a bigger following than they do. So they kill him. They put him in a tomb in a dark place. This story of Daniel sounds frighteningly, it's like history repeats itself, right? It's the same kind of thing going on. They put him in the dark tomb, and where does Jesus stay? Not there. Busts out of the tomb. Hey, what's up? You can't defeat me because I'm God. Whoop. And everyone says, history's changed. My life is different. To worship this Jesus changes everything. Jesus rose from the dead, and that's all the difference that this world ever needs. And that's not something for you. You've never done this before. You're not a Christ follower. This is the point for you. Jesus coming back from the dead changes everything. All right? Forget Daniel for just a second. Jesus changes everything. And when we admit that we're sinners, that we need Jesus, when we believe that Jesus is raised from the dead, and when we confess Jesus as Lord of our lives, when we say, Jesus, you're now the boss of my life, and from now on I'm going to follow you no matter what, that is the only thing you need to hear today, all right? That's the important part. That's why we gather each week to worship, because we're celebrating what Jesus has already done. He's already busted out of that tomb. He's already beat the dandelions. He's already been there for us, and he's already alive, and he is coming back again to rescue us. And we can trust that. And if you're not a believer, this is the prayer that God is listening for from you. He's listening for you to say, Jesus, I need you. All the other stuff, he's there for us. He listens, he loves us. But if you're not a believer, he's listening for those words. Jesus, I need you. And he's waiting so that he can jump right in and say, yes, I'm there for you. I believe. I'm right here for you. I will rescue you. I love you. Welcome home. Welcome to the winning side. So to be a Christ follower, to be someone that's like that, admit that you're a sinner, believe that Jesus is raised from the dead, and confess him as Lord of your life from this day forward. So what happens to Daniel? He gets delivered. I told you the end of the story. I don't know if you knew that or not. So, verse 19, then at break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. And he came near to the den where Daniel was. He cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "Oh, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lions?" Got that tension, right? Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him and also before you, O king. I have done no harm." Then the king was exceedingly glad. Party! Yeah, I mean, like, this is great news, right? He's exceedingly glad. And he commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. What happened to Daniel? Nothing. Good, you guys got that answer. Nothing. Yeah, nothing. The king, he wanted to spare Daniel, but at first light, the way the law was worded, at first light, the sentence had been carried out, so he could be rescued. So he's like waiting. There's a sign. Let's go. Let's see what happens. Get the stone out of the way. Here he is, Daniel. And Daniel was alive. The king could pardon him because he'd served his sentence. And he emerges from the pit, not a mark on him, no injury. How is it possible that this happens? Because prayer works. Because Daniel knew God. And he knew that God was in control of all things. He had trusted in his God. So here's what happens next, the results of all this. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions. That's stinky. They, their children, and their wives, and before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Just their bones? I mean, really, that's an understatement. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is a living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel, he prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. How about that, dude? He's still there, still plugging away, still doing his job, still serving the kings, still worshiping God, still doing everything that he was asked to do and still everything he was called to do. God had vindicated him. Daniel had proven himself to be a man of integrity. He'd proven himself to be faithful. So the king gets rid of the spy kids and all their families, and Darius honors Daniel. And Darius proclaims the greatness of God. This is significant for us, guys. I don't know if you realize that. When we as believers continue to pursue God and make God first in our lives, when we continue to stand up and we continue to bow down to God, the people around us, they notice. And when they notice, you know what happens? They get excited. That's so cool, right? They hear the stories of what God has done in our lives, and they get really pumped up about that kind of stuff. And they start saying, man, this is amazing. God is great. Your God is pretty awesome. And you didn't have to do anything. You just kept pursuing God, right? You're still pursuing that relationship. Throughout the book of Daniel, you see miracle after miracle, things that happen in Daniel's life and Daniel's friend's life. But always in those miracles, they always point to the greatness of God. And the people that are rescued or the miracle that occurs, they always say, yeah, this happened, and God is great because of this. They always point people to God. Miracles aren't so God can be so show off and, oh, look how cool God is. No. They're all so we can say God is great, and we should respect that, and we should honor that, and we should proclaim that greatness to everyone, right? God does miracles so that he can get glory, not so that you guys can have some cool stories to tell, right? But you should tell your stories so that people know how great God is. They demonstrate to a lost world that God is truly God and that God should be honored. Daniel wasn't rescued for his own benefit, but he was rescued to show God to Darius, to the king of the whole world at this time, that God was real and powerful. Daniel bowed down so that God's name could be stood up. Daniel stood up so that this king, Darius, would bow down. So what's the correct posture for a believer? And it's both. We do both. We stand up and bow down. We first establish the habit of bowing down, and second, we're ready to stand up whenever God calls us to. It's not an either-or proposition, because life is hard. Life is hard. So we have to strive to obey God no matter the situation or the circumstances. God has proven himself through the story of Daniel and in the events of what happened with Jesus that he is faithful to protect us, to preserve us, and to provide for us. So will you be a people that stand up and bow down? Let me pray. God, thank you that you give us that power, that opportunity to both stand up in your presence and stand up for your presence and to bow down to you. God, just continue to help us to seek you above all things. You told us to seek first the kingdom of God and your righteousness, and then everything else gets added after that. So God, help that to be our priority. Help us to seek you and find you. And God, as we seek you, help us to proclaim your greatness and your goodness to the people around us so that many will know just how amazing you are. God, your name is great and it's worth praising. And we just continue to do that today. In your name.